Hello, Rosita. Welcome back to the channel. You know what? I wasn't going to mention this situation with Kemi and Sir Keir Starmer. What happened during Prime Minister's questions when Sir Keir Starmer threw some shots at Kemi and called her a self-appointed Western Saviour. So anyway, before I start, I want us to listen to the clip and then we're going to come back.
So turning to the details of the plan he set out yesterday. Over the weekend, I suggested to the Prime Minister that he cut the aid budget, and I'm pleased that he accepted my advice. Mr. Speaker, it's the fastest response. It's the fastest response I've ever had from the Prime Minister. However, he announced £13.4 billion in additional defence spending yesterday. This morning, his Defence Secretary said the uplift is only £6 billion, which is the correct figure.
Prime Minister.
I'm going to have to let the Leader of the Opposition down gently. She didn't feature in my thinking at all. I was so busy over the weekend I didn't even see her proposal. I think she's appointed herself, saviour of the Western civilization. It's a desperate search for relevance.
I mean, I thought that was nicely done. I wasn't even going to talk about it, but it kept coming up on my FYP on TikTok. I kept on seeing, videos about it, commentaries and all that. And I thought, you know what, let's do this. Because there's a video I was going to make, this very video anyway, I was going to make it, looking at the bigger issues affecting us Africans in relation to global issues. So I thought, you know what, I think this could be a good starting point for this presentation. So yeah, as you've heard for yourself, the UK Prime Minister called Kemi Badenoch a self-appointed Western Saviour. That statement is loaded. First of all, if you look at the word self-appointed, it implies that she's imposing herself. She is inserting herself where she's not wanted. Of course, it's a debate, and in a debate, opposing sides have to argue their case. So I can appreciate that fact. But the fact that he chose that very statement, to me, it means a lot. As an African person, it means an awful lot. And as you can see by the title, I'm saying the UK Prime Minister called her a self-appointed Western Saviour. Should Kemi be focusing on Africa instead? I'm using Kemi, because she is my reference point. However, I want to make this perfectly clear. Even though I'm referencing Kemi, I'm using Kemi, really, I'm talking about us Africans. I'm talking about Africans as a whole, especially Africans who are living in the Western countries, Africans like me, like you and me. Anyway, before I come to Africans like you and me, I want to talk about Kemi for a second. The reason I'm referencing Kemi is because I have listened to some of her speeches, TED Talk speeches that she made years ago. There's one in particular that she made, I think it was about 13 years ago. It is called, The Culture of Low Expectations.
And if you remember around 2000, 2005, they had this Live Aid thing where, all these musicians came and they had Madonna and, some other people, I can't remember what they're called now. And then they had the African bits in Devon where all the African musicians went. Nobody watched their bits. Nobody, it wasn't part of the main show. And I was really angry that people like Bob Geldof, people like Bono were speaking on our behalf, telling other people what we needed. No one was actually listening to the Africans some of them had really important, brilliant things to say. And no one wanted to hear what they had to say. They wanted to see the pop stars, people who'd never been in Africa. Who would ever call D'banj to come and speak to Tony Blair and tell him exactly what he needs to do, in the UK to make it a better country? They'd never do that. And yet, the reverse happens. That patronizing attitude, really annoyed me.
I listened to that speech and I thought that speech was quite powerful. In that speech, Kemi came across as being quite passionate about her politics. And in that speech, Kemi came across as someone who was passionate about seeing a change in Africa. She came across as someone who wanted to see development in Africa. I'm not saying that she doesn't want to see development in Africa right now. I'm sure she does. But the question I'm asking is, whatever she's trying to do, is she going about it the wrong way? Hear me out for a second. This is me trying to rationalize where she's coming from. The way I'm seeing things, as a politician, of course, she is the leader of the Conservative Party, and She's a UK citizen, so her loyalty lies with the UK. But as an African, I'm sure deep down, she still wants to see Africa prosper. She still wants to see development in Africa. And looking at her policies, her proposals, why she wants to make it difficult for Africans to move to the UK, it's specifically because, we are in the UK. This is me thinking, I'm thinking, okay, maybe she's trying to make things difficult for immigrants, African immigrants, because she's an African, to relocate to the UK because she wants Africans, educated Africans, to stay put in Africa and to develop Africa. I mean, this is me trying to rationalize everything because, as we all know, Kemi Badenoch is a child of Nigerian immigrants who has risen to this powerful position where she's now the leader of the Conservative Party with the potential of becoming UK Prime Minister one day. And we all know about her strict immigration policies, excuse me, where she wants to make it difficult for immigrants to move to the UK. And recently she spoke about citizenship, making it harder for migrants to obtain that citizenship. And among those immigrants are Africans. Now that she's the leader of the Conservative Party, I'm coming back to that question. Is Kemi trying to help Africa as the leader of the Conservative Party? Because now her loyalties lie with the UK. That is where her loyalty lies, and she's made it perfectly clear. She's saying that it is time to tell the truth. On one hand, some could argue that by limiting African migration, Kemi is trying to force Africans to stay in Africa rather than running away from our continent to seek solutions elsewhere, to run to Western countries, one could argue. Because if Africa keeps losing its skilled workers, won't Africa continue to suffer? On the other hand, some may argue, in fact, I know that some people are furious. They are fuming because Kemi is now trying to close the same doors that helped her parents succeed in the UK. People are now saying, how come Kemi is trying to block the same opportunity that she benefited from? How come she's doing that? Being a child of immigrants herself. Because here's the reality. And now we're coming to the message, my main message. The truth is, despite the changes, despite things becoming harder, Africans still see migration is their best chance of success because progress in Africa is too slow. I'm not saying that there's no progress happening in Africa. There is, but that progress is too slow because meanwhile, people have to eat, people need jobs, people have to, live. They have to carry on with their lives, and we are not getting any younger. People are not going to sit there and wait to say, okay, things will improve in 2 years' time, in 5 years' time. So let me just hang in there. Because we get older, we get older. So, yeah, some people are arguing that shouldn't African leaders abroad, leaders like Kemi, be trying to find ways to make things easier on both sides or to help both sides instead of shutting the door completely? I mean, when it's all said and done, the way I look at things, Kemi is not the problem. I mean, yes, she's causing havoc, I'll admit, but the real issue or the bigger picture is the fact that Africans still feel as if the only way to make it is by leaving Africa. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this is where the problem is because despite everything, Africans are still leaving Africa right to this day. We talk about, the West is crumbling, the West is struggling, Africa is the future. But I still get emails, people asking me how they can come to the UK. We still make videos about how to move to the UK. People still want to know how to relocate. Don't get me wrong. Migration has been here since the beginning of time. People move from country to country. That is normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to us Africans and our problems, the fact that our progress in Africa is too slow, we are moving for economic reasons, mainly for economic reasons. We are moving to find jobs. We are moving for a better quality of life because there are very few opportunities back home. I say very few because I can't say that there are no opportunities. There are opportunities, but the opportunities are not nearly enough to actually get to a point where Africans say, you know what, there's no need for me to relocate. I've got everything that I need in Africa. We are not quite there yet. So Africans are still living. And the way I look at it, or why I think Africans are still relocating despite things, becoming tricky in the Western countries, is that people have lost hope, I think, on some level. People have lost faith in their African leaders. We are losing hope of things ever changing. And I've already covered this because of corruption and everything. Yes, there's progress, but that progress is slow. It is very slow. And I see it on social media as well when people are having discussions. For example, someone will come with an idea to say, okay, why don't we start this, or why don't we do this? And then someone will say, I don't think that will work because of A, B, C, D. And then someone will say, okay, we could do this instead. Why don't we try this? And then someone will say, not in Africa, that will never happen. It is because people have lost faith. People have lost hope because we have seen, or we have been let down for so long. We've now come to a point where we don't believe that things can actually turn around. And even if we have a leader, or we get a leader who is actually well-meaning, who is genuine, we don't trust that leader, like not right out of the gate. That leader has to prove themselves. We need to see it for ourselves that actually you are genuine, because most of our leaders are corrupt. So it is now difficult for Africans, for us Africans, to have faith in our leaders, because we have seen, or we have been let down time and time again. Another reason why Africans are still wanting to leave despite the global shift, despite anti-immigration policies and everything else that is happening in the world, that reason is lack of exposure or failure to read the room. Right now, with everything that is happening, the only reason I can genuinely come up with, the first one I've already told you. The second one is the fact that there are people, I feel, anyway, this is the way I'm looking at things, I feel that there are Africans who are genuinely unaware of the global shift that is happening. There are Africans out there, maybe, who, despite hearing the news, reading things in the newspapers, despite, attending forums where these discussions are taking place, they are failing to interpret the situation. They are failing to read the room, that actually countries are fed up, or that countries are changing their policies. They are trying to make it harder for people, or they are trying to discourage people from coming to their countries because of, all kinds of reasons. And by the way, the reasons, I can't say that the reasons are not genuine. Who am I to say that? Because right now the UK is talking about overpopulation, a lack of housing, all kinds of things are causing this anti-immigration sentiment, because things are becoming harder for everyone nowadays. So yeah, I can't say that the reasons for closing the door or for making it difficult for immigrants to come to the UK are not genuine. I can't say that. But what I know for a fact is that the anti-immigration sentiment is growing everywhere. Even in the United States, people are getting deported left, right, and center. So the fact that Africans are still actively trying to move abroad, despite all of that, tells me that there's something wrong. Something is not quite right. The last reason that I want to point out why, despite everything, Africans still want to move abroad is that people are curious by nature. There are some Africans who genuinely just want to come to satisfy their curiosity, to say, you know what, I went to the UK, I went to the United States, I tried things, and yeah, now I know what it's like. And there are also some Africans who genuinely don't believe that Africa is improving, or Africa is going to improve anytime soon. And I now have another question. Let's say Africa were to develop, Africa were to improve, and everything that we want, were to happen. Do you think that Africans would stop moving abroad? So anyway, having said all of this, what I want to say is, in conclusion, this is my opinion, this is how I see things. I feel that the future of Africa, or the success of Africa, depends on what we choose to focus on as Africans. It depends on where we choose to invest our time and energy. As Africans, where is our real focus? That's the question.